Dear participants, colleagues, dance educators, good afternoon. It's so good to be here. I think it is about time that this kind of a meeting takes place. I am honored to be invited to speak here today. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thank you all for being here. My topic today is very broad and complex. I am aware that every one of us may have a different view on what dance pedagogy means in the contemporary world, and about all other questions that follow. What should be taught? Who should teach? How? When? Why? And to whom? In another dance pedagogy conference in 2009, I contemplated how powerless we dance educators are in facing formidable global issues and challenges like, what can dance do in saving the planet? What can dance do to solve other problems like literacy, poverty, child abuse, and health problems? What is worth learning in dance? And who is dance for? There are no simple solutions to these problems. As my dear colleague and mentor, Dr. Sue Stinson, often says, we keep finding more questions and fewer answers. What I intend to do today, however, is to discuss the possibilities we have and the challenges that we face, and to recognize another saying by Sue. With every choice we make, we gain something and we lose something. Or to become wide awake is to move beyond yes and no, and right and wrong, and to recognize that every choice has consequences, both positive and negative. With this note, I am sending my warmest greetings and appreciation to Sue, who will soon be honored for her lifelong achievement in developing the study and practice of dance education. This celebration will take place next week at the annual conference of Congress on Research in Dance in New Mexico, USA. Sue Stinson is a great dance scholar who has inspired me personally since 1988, when I first met her and got familiar with her work. She has been most influential to me and to many other dance educators and scholars, and she continues to be a leading figure in our field. If any of you do not know her work, I strongly encourage you to find some of her work and read it. Sue is a role model and mentor to me and embodies the notion of teacher's significance. As I contemplate how one person can make such a difference, it empowers me to imagine what we could achieve together. It also reminds me of teachers' power and the great ethical responsibility towards every individual student that is embedded in the teaching profession. I believe we all agree on the significance of our profession, dance pedagogy, in the contemporary world. Most of us probably think that dance pedagogy is of growing importance for the society in general, for development of the art form, and for the well-being of human beings and human communities. The deep commitment that dance educators seem to have to their work may, however, overshadow the critical self-reflection that is needed for any profession to grow. It is my intention today to practice this kind of reflection and to address some conflicting themes and difficult questions. I hope that through discussing openly, we may recognize the most significant values and premises that connect us, dance educators. I also believe that becoming aware of the conventions in our thinking and in our practice is crucial in developing our profession. Respecting different views and opinions is a basis for dialogue, growth, and internal cohesion for this profession. We need cohesion so that we will be better equipped to continue to develop our work in the world of limited resources, recognition, and respect. My topic implies a focus on current times. This is exactly what I want to emphasize, because clinging on to the past will not help us in making a difference or developing our profession. While respecting the past, we need to look at it with a critical eye and try to make things better. We do not need to reject history and tradition, but to situate it in the context of contemporary times. We should not close our eyes nor our studio doors. We need to see widely and thoroughly, and to be open to what is going on in the world around us. While the dance studio is a sacred, sheltered space and should remain so, we need to recognize the turmoil that our students may carry within themselves and to be aware of the increasing tensions in society. We need to be alert and present in relation to our times. Studying and understanding our own times, or as the French philosopher Michel Foucault says, practicing ontology of today, is an alternative way to practice philosophy, a way that is in direct contact with our current life situation. This is no simple task, because when a new era begins, the old ones do not cease to exist. Thus, contemporary time contains past eras, traditions, and ideologies. The question is, how do old conventions continue and evolve and become merged with new ones? What are the new inspirations and elements that we need to weave into our practices, and how do we do that? Patty Lather, a postmodern feminist scholar, says that all scientific paradigms operate simultaneously today, and that there is a historical sense to their articulation. Paradigm shifts occur as a reaction to inadequate explanatory power of existing paradigms. Why is this relevant to our discussion here today? I think it's important to see how scientific, educational, and artistic practices originate from the same intellectual and ideological roots. Our cultural history evolves in big waves, where developments in science, art, and philosophy are intertwined. Only that too often, it seems to me, educators are slow to respond to new ideas in the level of practice. I don't think that dance educators are an exception here. When we take a look at progressive developments in the arts, in sciences, and in educational philosophy and research, we can see that most of the developments strive outside educational institutions. Schools, including dance schools, remain largely untouched by them, continuing to operate in the way they have operated for many decades. Old paradigms continue to exist in schools in most apparent ways. Schools can be seen as containers of pedagogical history, as most conservative institutions in contemporary societies. That is, they conserve values, traditions, habits, culture, and human beings in both literal and metaphorical sense of the word. It is also possible to see how the leading ideology behind current educational practices originates from modern times, and thus can be labeled as modernist. Now, it may be necessary to clarify the meaning of the term modern, because it is such a complex and manifold concept. It may refer to something that is very current or something that is absolutely old-fashioned. The term modern is often used to describe a wide range of periods, more specifically the Euro-American culture that developed out of the Enlightenment and continues in some ways into the present. Even more specifically, the term modern is applied to the period beginning in the shift of the turn of the 20th century, late 1800s or early 1900s, continuing at least until 1960s, until the term postmodern emerged. I think it's useful to focus on this distinctive break in time, situated in the middle of last century. We can talk about this break as a shift from the modernist, structural, humanist theories and discourses to the postmodernist, post-structural, post-humanist theories and discourses. This is when scholars in many fields started to look critically at their possibilities to gain objective knowledge about the world and to make progress in all areas of human life through science. Many scholars rejected positivism and objectivism, the search for universal truth. Instead, they became post-positivists. This term can be freely translated as after certainty. Post-positivists accept that knowledge is always situated in time and place and always connected to the knower, that is, subjective. At the same time, increasing number of artists became disillusioned by representational or objectifying modes of art making, and educational scholars began to inquire into the depths of human experience of learning and to question mechanistic views on learning, like behaviorism. Post-positivism and postmodernism can be considered as criticism towards positivism or modernism. The characteristics that this post-movement identified as defining aspects of modernity or modern society include the following. I'm not going to read through them, you can see. Oops. The following. Many characteristics listed here are related to a transition from a relatively isolated local communities to a more integrated, large-scale society. This is a significant step that has led the way towards globalization. That is, of course, the very defining characteristic of contemporary world or postmodern era, our own times. If we accept that the past is contained in the present, we can see the complexity of our own times. The intertwinement of local, isolated communities, larger communities, and global communities. The question for us is, how do we understand our task as dance educators in this complex networks or system of cultures and communities? Dance scholar Sherry Shapiro has examined the question of diversity and global aesthetics in relation to dance pedagogy. She writes that the recognition of diversity implies that there are multiple meanings of what dance is, or what good dance is. Despite growing awareness of diversity and multiculturalism in dance education, she points out that we must also examine the underlying assumptions and dispositions we continue to hold as a part of our embodied ideology of the aesthetic. What I mean by this is the way we continue to see particular dance forms as superior while giving other forms less value. She refers to Western forms of dance that include theatrical forms established during modernity and commercial popular dance forms that mass media effectively distributes around the globe. It seems evident that respecting diversity has become ever more challenging and crucial in times of globalization, where, quote, children across the globe seek to imitate the fashion, music, and dance of the West, unquote. Many dance educators, including many of us here today, have become aware of the homogenizing influence of Western dance forms and the pitfalls of modernist arts education. Modernist arts education can be considered as a continuation of the romantic conception that considers art as separate from everyday life, and the artists as exceptional and gifted individuals. Most of us who have learned to think this way know how to appreciate works of arts as objects according to certain standards. We know how to classify people as artists and non-artists. Adhering to a modernist framework, arts educators look for talent to be further cultivated. In so doing, children are categorized early and treated accordingly. Often students who are considered talented get more attention and more encouragement. Modernist assumptions posit human development and learning as controllable and predictable. Thus, a goal for arts education is to cultivate children's talents by correct educational measures. I often wonder how much talent goes unnoticed. Or actually, what is talent? Embracing individualism, romantic ideas of art are reflected in artistic and pedagogical practices that bear an underlying connection to modernist views on the world and the human being. We see how artistic conceptions concur with the scientific worldviews of modern times. As the premises of these beliefs are crumbling, artists and art educators are compelled to re-examine these views with a critical eye. The postmodern view, if you will, gets its momentum from this kind of critical awareness. Along this line, the Finnish choreographer, dance scholar Kirsi Monni claims that the philosophical notions of universal truth and permanent knowledge, answering the question of what is, have been replaced to questions of how things exist, how the sense and meaningfulness of being is continually worked out and revealed in temporal historical world. Monni claims that this shift has made it possible to speak, even in scholarly terms, about such matters as bodily existence, bodily awareness, kinesthetic understanding, and articulation of movement. Moreover, it has become possible also to posit this kind of questioning as a conscious starting point for construction and signification of dance. In my view, this shift has also had a great influence on dance pedagogy during recent years. Incorporating somatic awareness, that is, increasing appreciation of the perspective of the dancing subject into dance training and dance education, has taken place slowly but steadily in many contexts. In my view, this somatic turn, while widely accepted and welcomed in many places, is still in its very early stage in most dance institutions and programs. In our master program in dance pedagogy, we have a strong focus on somatic approaches. And while this is mostly greatly appreciated by our students, they sometimes seem to question this emphasis on softness. Also, voices from outside our institutions seem to label our program of being mostly about breathing. These accounts may reflect the paradox that many dance practitioners must encounter when trying to resolve the opposing pulls between expanding technical demands with the increasing awareness about well-being of dancers and the developments in contemporary art where interest in traditional performance skills is decreasing. Kirsi Monni has also examined the preconceptions that Western or modernist aesthetics have created for dance and the body. According to her, in Western history, an artwork has imitated reality as a symbol or representation of it. Dance works are viewed as scenic and symbolic performances, and human body has been considered as aesthetically moldable matter. The choreographer creates an aesthetically constructed form by organizing moving bodies in time and space. Monni claims that certain models developed in the classical ballet of 18th and 19th century have dominated the field of Western dance art for most of the 20th century. She highlights two notions that are significant in understanding this influence. One, materiality of an aesthetic object, and symbolism. Monni defines these as principles of aesthetic order and design favoring either formal, symbolic, or mimic narrative content. In her dissertation, Monni presents a new paradigmatic orientation to dance, where an artwork does not imitate reality, is not an aesthetic object, nor an initiator of aesthetic experience. Rather, quote, it offers a possibility to participate in the unconceitedness of being which is taking place in the artwork, unquote. She writes, in the new paradigm, the foundation for the meaningfulness of dance art is not in aesthetically formed movements, but in the manner in which dance sets up disclosedness of existence as bodily consciousness, conscious motion. Dance does not utilize space, time, and form like some objectified material, but discloses being's temporal and spatial happening, a kinetic logos, the bodily involvement in being, interpreted through a historically situated world. Monni's careful examination reveals the intertwinement of metaphysics and aesthetics in our Western history, and helps us to understand how human existence, notions of truth and reality, notions of work of art, movement, and corporeality are imposed, construed, and performed in these modes of thought, and how they are reflected in our choreographic, artistic, and pedagogical practices. I agree with her that material and symbolic approach to human movement and an instrumental view of the body are problematic, especially in ethical terms. I am referring to my earlier notion on the teacher's power and the ethical responsibility that this power position entails. Another problem arises from the larger meanings that an aesthetic system of any kind entails. We may think that dance is just dance, or art is just art, and fail to see the connection between aesthetics and ethics, or aesthetics and a larger view of the world. What I mean here is that value judgments involve both aesthetic and ethical considerations. Beauty and value are connected. Conceptions of beauty, virtue, and value influence decision-making in every aspect of society. Also, arts education, overtly or covertly, shapes the way young people learn to interpret the world. That is, what they consider valuable. As arts educators, we pass on our aesthetic values on to the next generation, consciously or unconsciously. Arts education is not innocent even in terms of cultural imperialism. I think it is fair to say that Western aesthetics dominate arts education. In the context of dance, this means, for example, that the aesthetic preferences of the teacher dominate the movement qualities and choreographical choices. Through this practice, the teachers, consciously or not, pass on to the next generation the aesthetic models that are inscribed, there's a ply here, Western dance training. When I see young dance students performing dances choreographed by us, that is middle class, Western, female dance teachers, I often become concerned about the homogenizing influence of dance education. During this process, the question of what art is and what it could be may become compromised and standardized. The students may begin to limit their expressive qualities and creative powers according to the aesthetic values present in the context of dance education. If choreography is understood in its wider meaning as a way of seeing the world, according to Michael Klein and Steve Vaugh, they suggest this definition, then dominating aesthetics bear significance also in the way our students will perceive and understand the world. From this viewpoint, it is no wonder that challenging object-oriented art, traditions of representation, and the view on the artist as individual are becoming more and more commonplace. The somatic or postmodern turn in dance that started to take place during 1960s can be seen as a rebellion against the aesthetics that objectified the body, movement and the dancer in its attempt to achieve symbolistic representational ideal. During this turn, individualism became replaced with connectedness and presence. Somatic contemplative practices replaced traditional dance training techniques. Improvisational, collaborative and experiential approaches to choreography emerged. Dance art escaped from proscenium stages and inhabited unconventional spaces. Seeing art as an encounter, as participation and dialogue, instead of an object to be viewed from a distance, can hardly be considered as exploration in the margin. I think that it's timely to contemplate what this might mean for dance education. Moreover, it seems to me that seeing artistic practice as dialogical and collective makes it possible to see art as fundamentally educational, if we consider education as supporting the growth of human beings and communities. On the other hand, art education, in the process of giving up its grip on the modernist pedagogical premises, can be considered art in and of itself. If we see art beyond aesthetic objects, and if we reject the notion of the artist as an individual genius. In this sense, the meaning of an artwork or artistic experience extends the meanings connected to its form and beauty. Citing Kirsi Monni again, from the late 1900s, dance could be seen also as a straightforward criticism of the aesthetics of beauty, taking a political stance as revelation of historical situation, as revelation of existence, as corporeal, temporal, and local phenomenon in deeply interconnected world. Aestheticized movement and the notion of beauty in dance art is a complex and anything but a simple and straightforward set of problems. The Finnish scenographer and scholar Liisa Ikonen claims that the way the artwork is created is always reflected in the work itself. A predetermined, controlled process produces a closed form with a single meaning, whereas a process with no predetermined aims leads to an open form that bears multiple meanings. An open form is dialogical. It challenges the audience to participate, leaving the meanings open. An open form discloses reality as it opens multiple possibilities to see and understand it. A closed form conceals reality because it represents or repeats one interpretation of reality. I wonder what would it mean for the practice of dance pedagogy if we envision it as an open form or system. Before probing this question, I will take a brief look at the concept of pedagogy and see how the notion of openness can be applied to it. The word pedagogy comes from the Greek, in which ped means child and ago means lead. So it literally means to lead the child. In ancient Greece, a pedagogue was a slave who escorted children, usually boys, to school, or I think it was always boys, and generally supervised them. The pedagogue let the children walk ahead, but followed and took care that they found their way towards the right destination. The notion of pedagogy thus implies that there is a direction, a destination, and that it is known. This explains the historical and traditional obligation for educators and teachers to define the aims, contents, and methods of their teaching beforehand. This ontological burden seems to be embedded even in current assumptions on teaching, learning, and human development. As this weight of predetermination is still imposed on most educational institutions and teachers, including myself. Advances in human sciences and philosophy have provided ample grounds for revising these beliefs, but despite advances in some countries, the traditional thinking models still prevail widely. Learning, including dance learning, is still largely considered to be a structured, guided, individual phenomenon. Over 40 years ago, the Brazilian educational reformist and the father of critical pedagogy, Paulo Freire, coined this traditional pedagogical model as banking education. For him, the following attitudes and practices are characteristics of banking education. The teacher teaches and the students are taught. The teacher knows everything and the students know nothing. The teacher thinks and the students are thought about. The teacher talks and the students listen meekly. The teacher disciplines and the students are disciplined. The teacher chooses and enforces his choice and the students comply. The teacher acts and the students have the illusion of action through the action of the teacher. The teacher chooses the program content and the students, who were not consulted, adapt to it. The teacher confuses the authority of knowledge with his own or professional authority, which he sets in opposition to the freedom of students. The teacher is the subject of the learning process, while the pupils are mere objects. Freire describes such education as depositing, the teacher being the depositor and the student depositories. The action left for the student is limited to receiving, filing, and storing the deposits. Around the same time, Foucault published his seminal work, Discipline and Punish, The Birth of the Prison. In this work, he sheds light on ways in which institutions in modern societies, including schools, utilize surveillance and discipline that becomes manifest in various ways of controlling the body and bodies in space. Disciplining the body in education is a phenomenon that deserves great attention even today. It has been and continues to be a topic of great interest for dance education research. Among others, dance scholar Jill Green has drawn from Foucault's notion of the docile body. According to her, mastering and shaping the body in dance education produces docile bodies that require a system of codification and methods that are, like Foucault's socialized bodies, under meticulous control and surveillance. Unquote. The production of docile bodies certainly takes place in dance education, just checking, and can be considered as integral element of all forms of modern education. Foucault's and Freire's critical observations are products of their time, the end of the modern era. Postmodern times and critical scrutiny of oppressive practices may have brought gradual changes toward less oppressive educational practices in some societies or particular schools. In others, neoliberal educational policies have created new forms of oppression. According to Patty Lather, educators need to be aware of the power-saturated discourses that monitor and normalize our sense of who we are and what is possible. I agree with her, remembering my own experiences as a dance student, especially in the 1970s and 1980s. My studies then did not include any creative, collaborative, or contemplative work. Developing a deep personal relationship to dance and art should not, in my opinion, be a young dance student's lonely search, but an integral element of dance education in its all stages. I have found comfort in the words of the educational scholar William Dahl, according to whom postmodern pedagogy involves a reflective relationship between the teacher and the student, where the teacher does not ask the student to accept teacher's authority, but to join with the teacher in inquiry into that which the student is experiencing. This kind of thinking turns the modernist idea of pedagogy around. The adult, the teacher, is not the model, the master, the expert, but a facilitator and a co-learner. This postmodern perspective has enormous implications for education. Dahl writes that, "I believe a new sense of educational order will emerge, as well as new relations between teachers and students, culminating in a new concept of curriculum. The linear, sequential, easily quantifiable ordering system dominating education today, one focusing on clear beginnings and definite endings, could give way to a more complex, pluralistic, unpredictable system or network. This approach requires a curriculum rich in diversity, problematics, and heuristics, as well as classroom atmosphere that fosters exploration. When the environment is rich and open, it is possible that multiple interpretations and perspectives can come into play. Dahl claims that anomalies, even mistakes, must be nurtured, and this means dialoguing seriously with the students about their ideas as their ideas. The postmodern view on curriculum and education presented above bears resemblance to Klein and Valk's vision on a dancing system, where the constellations are loose enough to actually reach a state of excitement or play without falling apart, without losing identity. A system, such as a society or a state, can be dancing, unlike our present-day situation, where the structures are too tightly constrained. Coming to a conclusion. So, we live in a contemporary world. It is a world of complex relationships and networks, a world where all traditions coexist with fusions, mergers, and emerging forms of art and culture. I recently visited Hawaii and learned that today ancient hula dance coexists with a contemporary form that is performed in connection to music heavily influenced by Western music. For example, the whole notion of melody that is foreign to Polynesian music. Both forms are equally appreciated and treasured by kumu hula, that is, teachers of hula, their students, and the multicultural population of Hawaii. My stereotyped conception of hula dance in grass skirts got completely altered, and now I consider hula as a form of art. It would, however, be a wild leap to suggest that we would include hula or almost any other ethnic dance form into our dance curricula here in Scandinavia or Europe. Thus, I am only suggesting this as an exercise of appreciation and imagination, hopefully leading to a more inclusive and respectful view when considering the diversity of world dance and the cultures that exist in our global village. Who knows what kind of dance forms will emerge in 10 years, in 20 years? Thinking back 10 or 20 years, hip-hop and other street dance forms were not really appreciated in the dance academia. Today, these forms that have a strong ethnic origin and roots are widely accepted dance forms and often considered as art. Today, popular and ethnic dance forms easily merge with Western theater dance. Why do we then still separate and categorize dance forms in the curricula of dance institutions and in our pedagogical practice? Why do we need to develop form-specific pedagogies like contemporary dance pedagogy or ballet didactics? Today, cultural influences, ideologies, and worldviews are in constant motion. Paradoxically, slowing down, stopping, or motionlessness are becoming new isms, even in contemporary art and dance. Exhausting dance, a notion introduced by the dance scholar Ed.Lic, is another commentary against the modernist urge to progress, to grow, to reach more. The question arises, what is the significance of bodily skill and virtuosity in the world where we have already exceeded the limits of human performance capacity and new feats are only accomplished at the expense of health and safety? The question for me at least is, can we see dance as much more or much less than bodily virtuosity and clever organization of movements in time and space? Can there be dance in our thoughts, in our relationships, in our institutional structures? Can we apply the concepts of flexibility, strength, and endurance in a metaphorical sense and appreciate the dancing qualities, mobility and motility that exists in our everyday life, in society, and in nature? This line of thinking leads to understanding art as a socio-cultural activity where concepts of reality, knowledge, and mind are considered as organizational systems, as networks of relations and contexts. Seeing ourselves as part of a dancing ecology may support a greater appreciation of various shades of human existence, cultural diversity, and sustainable practices in our work. This is how I envision dance pedagogy in the contemporary world. Thank you.
Thank you, Eeva, for this very elucidating presentation, I think, of issues that have been addressed by all of us for some time. We do have some time for questions. Lie down, stand up, move around. We will have an intermission in a while, yes, we know. But so we have some time to ask Eeva questions. However, we also think that both keynote presentations and other presentations will be food for thought and for our discussions all through the conference and not only now. But please, if someone would like to pose a question to Eeva. Or you're relaxing. Then I'll start. I was thinking about the Freire and the banking education, which we sort of, is familiar to us in a sense. On the opposite side, you can find, it's a French philosopher called Jacques Rancière that has been very inspirational to contemporary teachers as well as choreographers. And his idea, he wrote a book some time ago called The Ignorant Schoolmaster, in which he sort of advocated a system where, shortly put, the student learns what the teacher doesn't know. So I see Freire on one opposite and Jacques Rancière on the completely different. You are somehow addressing an in-between between those two systems, or how would you put it?
I'm closer to Rancière.
You're closer to Rancière.
Yes. But Freire is writing about the situation in the schools very critically, so they can't really be seen as opposites.
No.
They are actually
it's
very
the
close.
System,
it's
exactly.
Yeah. Just focusing on different part of or different elements.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if I just would address this further, because he is quite provocative, Rancière, and he would not consider the teacher even as a facilitator, I think. So that's an interesting issue, that he thinks that the whole capacity of learning exists in the child without actually the teacher being present.
I wonder if he has ever had a child himself. Because if you think education as a completely child's or student's activity and with no, I think teachers are needed. Are we? I think we are important, but just that we don't think that we are that ours is the only influence that there is. We should be really humble about the way we can, humble and also careful because of the power we have.
Right. Anyone? Anyone who would be opposing the teacher as facilitator and would rather go for the banking education?
Or structured.
Or structured, yes.
Pedagogy.
Given if you teach for different kinds of outcomes in professional ballet?
Yeah, yeah.
What could...
I'm open to criticism. It's a provocation also.
Yes, Yanni? Wait. Yeah. Everyone heard that? Yes, I think so. Well,
so I don't know. That's a question that I'm asking actually you. Yes, yes. This is the big question. Yeah.
On that note, we could also think of, for example, I think mainly of the American system, where they also have the problem with the kind of world dance courses, where you get sort of 2 weeks hula, 2 weeks of this, and they have a problem that's inscribed in their curricula that they should deliver these courses, and that's also a problem. How do you get into depth if you're sort of presented with many different dance cultures?
Well, what I'm actually thinking about is not to study each form in depth, but to be aware, to be somehow affected by things that exist in the world, and see how that feeds into a contemporary dance class, for instance. What, you know, so that it might change a little bit. It's just that you have a lot of ideas, a lot of influences, and also from the students. It's not only the teacher who has all this experience and ideas, but the students, they have visited other countries, they travel, and they have seen a lot of programs, TV programs. They know, and they talk to each other. So just to be kind of, I don't know the word in English, huokoinen, apua. Finnish people. Yeah.
Aware of?
It's like that you don't have a surface, but the surface is transparent. Porous, yes, thank you. So that you are not like closed but affected, yeah. Like cells. I'm sorry, I'm talking.
There, yes, please.
Mm-hmm. There should be a mic. Yeah.
We'll see if we can summarize it once you go ahead. Yeah.
to forms of technique that are extremely injurious and high torsion in both directions, lateral impact, and was just wondering if you would actually then comment on that, because you did
Yeah.
mention the 60s.
Can I just shortly say?
Yes.
So you began with describing the new ideas that came from the 1960s and the way in which they developed, but that you experienced a backlash that has happened with sort of highly virtuosic techniques and different kinds of training that actually are sort of cutting off that development into a more somatic bodily dimension. And if you have comments.
Well, I think it depends from where you are and what institution or context you look at, because it's always been, I think, this somatic has been in the margin, pretty much. I mean, it's never been really a mainstream. So we have had, as the present contains the past, we still have all the old forms, and whether or not you see them as being more influential or more emphasized, it depends from where you look from. But I'm focusing now in the dance class, what happens in the dance class. So of course I can't see to every dance class, but based on what I have heard in conferences, in discussions with colleagues and so forth, it seems to me that there is more progress in the art world than in the dance pedagogy. So in terms of, or progress, or I would say the other way, non-progress, so that we are you understand what I mean by progress here is that there's this daring of not doing things the way they were done before, but pedagogy is very slow in responding to that.
Yeah. Right. Sorry that I don't know all of your names, but now I know that it's Irene Hultman.
Hello.
Yeah.
It's on doing this then. Does that work?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just have oh, this is so uncomfortable.
I know.
How could you do this for so long? No, I just have a comment, like with the lady over there and with what's happening. I'm gonna kind of talk about this because I find this is really interesting. What's happening in the classroom, in some way. I both active and non-active. Though both teach and don't teach. Oh, I hate this. Like I don't. Oh, it's terrible. Hello again. Let's try again. Maybe further away. Is that better? You can still hear me, right? Yes. And because it was such a fat lecture, put it that way, with many different overviews of like the dance in history. Do we have dances as a socio-political function, or as it is in socio-political in the classroom, like wide and small? So it's very hard to figure out like a question in some way, you know.
Sorry.
And I do think that the somatics is a fashion right now more than anything, and it's about, we'll see if it stays. We don't know that yet. It's just starting to be introduced, I feel, right now. And why it takes so long in dance is I'm living in the States, and I know it's practical also, because every teacher needs a job. So it's really hard. And I remember I danced with Trisha Brown, and I came just like 10 years ago maybe to purchase. I sub a lot. And they said, Trisha Brown who? And I was like amazed that they actually did not know. They're Limon, Cunningham, and they were not introduced. It's very changed now, thanks to a lot like Neil Greenberg, who you know, who has started the more kinetic things up there. And so I just have comments, because I think it's interesting where the dance education is actually going. And I feel, which I would love to talk about more, like the separation that is happening now between dance pedagogy and the dance practice. I see, and that I don't understand. I don't understand that shift somehow, because we're all working towards something, whatever that is. I would say. So that, I mean, I guess that's my question. I
So
didn't know that was my question, but that is my question. Okay.
So are you asking if there is such a shift?
Yeah,
or?
yeah, you were talking a lot about
Mm-hmm.
us as dance pedagogues.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
You know,
Well,
and
as I said, we can't see into the dance studios. When, you know, most of them we can't really see what's going on. So this is based on numerous discussions and hearing presentations and seeing these dance performances by children. You know what is put on stage. So there, what happened in a dance class when there is 20 girls dressed in a similar uniform, and when they are moving in unison and they are looking, where's the teacher showing the beat? You know, I see that a lot. I'm inferring, but I would like to see kids as costume designers, as narrative producer, you know, bringing their stories onto the stage in dance recitals and so on.
Yeah, we will have to follow, but yeah, I think you're addressing something we might return to, and that has to do with the pedagogical situation in relation to the aesthetic field outside of the studio and the school, and how they are relating. And I think that you actually addressed it in several ways during your speech.
And this is not to say nothing has happened. I'm sorry if I'm being provocative, and I'm just, that's my task in a way, to start something that then people can.
Excellent.
Yeah.
We'll fight a little bit here,
Yeah.
and during that time, for 15 minutes, you're welcome to have an intermission, and then we'll go on to a lecture demonstration. So in 15 minutes, please be back. Thank you.
Thank you.